to miss a red flag. I've been known to put my
If everybody would like to take their seats, we are about to commence. A big warm welcome to members of our party and guests who have come here tonight to our Southwest Sydney June branch meeting, where we will be holding a debate. My name is Gemma and I'm the Vice President of the New South Wales Libertarian Division, and I also run the Southwest Sydney branch with Victor Tay and Vanessa, who is not here tonight because she is currently getting ready to go overseas to Kenya to help some sick children over there. So I think we should just give her a round of applause in her absence for that. I'd like to extend my thanks again to the Crossroads Hotel out here in Casula, who give us this room free of charge every single month. So please make them feel loved by buying drinks from the bar and food from the bistro. We like to show them our support as they support us every month. Okay, so this is one of the first big debates we've done here in Southwest Sydney. And of course, we've picked one of the most spicy topics in libertarianism, and that is abortion. So abortion is a very contentious issue when it comes to libertarianism, as there are pro-choice and pro-life libertarian arguments. Because of this, we do not have an official party position. Our elected members have a conscious vote on the matter, meaning that they would vote on a bill relating to abortion in line with their own personal views. I will also state that as tonight's debate is a libertarian philosophical debate, gender is irrelevant. Quite a few angry women attacked us on X, raising objections to men debating this topic. But we were all conceived by a male and female. We all developed in the womb. And this is, as always, an open debate where men and, of course, women can take part in the Q&A portion of the evening. As usual, we'll be using Slido. So this is a system where you'll be able to submit your questions, and remember that you can take part in upvoting. So if you give a thumbs up to a question on Slido, that will move the question up the queue. So to give you a better understanding for those who haven't used Slido, you scan the QR code, which is on the screen, or you'll be giving the link on the YouTube link, Facebook, etc. And you enter, and then you'll be asked a question. I believe Victor's going to put a polling question up now. So what would you consider yourself? Pro-life, pro-choice, or undecided? So if everybody wants to hit that little survey to make sure that it's working, maybe to give us an indication of what we're dealing with here tonight. Yep, so slido.com, you can pop in that code. Yep, okay. All right, so that gives you an understanding. So you can enter your questions into Slido, and that is how we will be operating the Q&A session via this system, so that we don't have anybody in the room yelling over each other, etc. Okay, So before we begin the debate, I would like to establish that termination of pregnancy where the mother's life is at risk has been excluded from this debate. So the two debaters will not be including that scenario within their arguments. All right, so now I'll introduce our two debaters. Mr. Rob Cribb. Yep. Rob is a life member of the Libertarian Party who currently serves as our New South Wales Policy Director and is a member of our New South Wales State Executive. He was previously John Ruddick's campaign manager and chief of staff. He has a degree in economics and has worked as a probability consultant for sports betting agencies. Rob is known as the numbers guy within our party and has been a devoted member for over a decade. And he will be debating Vinay. Would you like to get up, Vinay? Everyone give him a clap. Vinay is on the party's federal executive and the Deputy Director of Policy federally. He has co-authored 2 books on liberty, Media Wars, The Battle to Shape Our Minds, and Modernizing Aristotle's Ethics. How very apt that he is currently moderating a podcast series on controversies in libertarianism with some well-known American libertarians. His work has appeared on various publications including Spectator Australia, The Savvy Street, a US-centric public intellectual e-zine he founded, and the Atlas Society, which is committed to spreading Ayn Rand's work. He has run twice as a candidate for us in the federal election under the Libertarian Party banner. So the debate format tonight, each speaker will conduct an 8-minute opening statement. Then rebuttal will be 4 minutes each. Then we will have them interrogate each other with 2 questions with 2 minutes to respond. And it will end with a 4-minute closing statement from each speaker. Once the formal debate comes to a close, we will commence with the Q&A section until time permits, and 2 minutes will be given to each of you to respond to each question. Any questions? Okay, well, I believe we shall start with Mr. Rob Cribb, who will be arguing pro-life.
All right, so I'd first like to thank Gemma and the Southwest Branch in New South Wales for inviting me to have this debate and give this side of this debate particularly. It is a position I earnestly believe, but beyond that, I think it's important to actually get it out there that it is a valid libertarian position. So anyone out there who disagrees with me that this could be the logical conclusion of libertarian philosophy, obviously my number 1 goal will be to get you to agree with me, but my number 2 goal will be to at least convince you that I guess the default position and the natural assumption, especially of non-libertarians and new libertarians, that libertarians have to believe in abortion to birth or whatever else, is not true. That there are at least 2, I think there are probably 3 valid libertarian paths you could take to different conclusions on this issue. And I think mine is the most valid, and I will make that argument. But if I'm unsuccessful in fully persuading you that my argument is the most correct, I at least hope I can persuade you, if you don't already agree, that it is compatible with libertarianism. And that it's not libertarianism except this. It's not moderate libertarianism, because I've heard some people say, oh, I agree with libertarians except I'm pro-life and it's not compatible. And that is a nonsense. It's not true. You can be pro-life, and you can be pro-life and believe in total restrictions on abortion. You can believe that abortion should be outlawed, which is the argument I'm going to make. There is a very logical libertarian path to get to that. And that is what I'm going to argue. Now, you may not agree with me entirely at the end, but as I said, I hope I can convince you at least that is true, that the natural assumption that libertarians have to be pro-choice is false. And I will start, I guess, with what libertarianism is, which I think is potentially some of the guts of the confusion on this. So some people will say that libertarianism, it's not a moral philosophy, it's just a political philosophy about what the state should do, what law should exist, and what the government should do. And therefore, there's nothing backing it up there. It's just that the government should be less involved in your life, and therefore, obviously, that government should be less involved in women's decisions about their healthcare. And I will, go on to argue that I don't think murder is healthcare. But putting that aside, this I guess underlying assumption that libertarianism is not a moral philosophy, I think, is incorrect. I think it is a good shorthand sometimes to point to people that just because we don't believe in the war on drugs doesn't mean we condone drug use. So we can say, well, libertarianism isn't saying that just because it's not illegal that you should do it. And that is correct. So I think there is something there in terms of saying that it's not a moral philosophy. It's a good shorthand to explain people to things like that on a campaign, but it's not really entirely true. So libertarianism is what I would call a limited moral philosophy. It provides moral philosophy for a specific set of actions. So what it does is it provides morality regarding the use of force, right? So it tells you when you're allowed to initiate force on people. Now, that shouldn't be the only moral framework you use. You should, obviously think about other things like cheating monopoly is, immoral to most people, but it's not really initiating force on anyone. But libertarianism provides a moral framework for when it is okay to use force. And I will go over that just quickly before I get onto the actual abortion topic, because I don't want to spend too much time just talking about libertarianism. But it is important because this is a debate about what a libertarian government or a libertarian society should do. Libertarianism is built on the non-aggression principle. It also applies to the state. So you should not, to put it, I guess, crudely, you should not hurt people to take their stuff. And the reason that ends up so much tied up into what government is doing is when you interact with other people on a normal daily basis, you do that anyway, right? So if, you go and meet someone, you don't think it's okay to go and, steal their property or hit them. But if you extend that out, that's all that government does. All that government does is threaten you with violence. So if you believe in libertarianism, you don't think the state has a special moral carve-out just because, a majority of people in a majority of seats have voted for them. So that is the basis of libertarianism, and it's not just a political philosophy about what the law should be. That's almost secondary to what I would call a limited moral philosophy about when it is okay to use force. Now, if it's libertarianism being built on these foundations, if it's only okay to use force in self-defense, obviously all libertarians should believe that murder is illegal. So my main point here is effectively that abortion is murder. Now, obviously that there's a lot of heavy lifting that still needs to be done in my 2.5 minutes left explaining this. But the real question here, as with non-libertarians, is when life begins. So if you believe that abortion is not murder, you either believe that the unborn baby, is not alive, or you believe that killing it in some way is not murder. Now, the two possible ways, and because Vinay gets to speak second, I'm not sure what he's going to argue. You can either argue a pro-choice side or an eviction side. We'll see what he argues. But I think quite obviously life begins at conception, because everything else has what I would call a continuity problem. So if you believe that, life begins at brainwaves or heartbeats or birth or whatever, it's very hard to determine exactly when that exists. And anything slightly before and slightly after is going to look vastly the same. I think the real transformative moment in everyone's life is conception, when the sperm meets the egg. Slightly before and slightly after that moment, that's really the line in the sand. So I believe that is when life begins, and I will, spend some of the rest of my little allotments talking about why, if that's when life begins, it is totally unconscionable to ever knowingly kill it. So Vinay may make an evictionist argument here, saying that the unborn baby is a trespasser. I'm not sure if he's going to do that, but if he does, I certainly have some rebuttals to that. and I will hand off to Vinay to make his opening statement. Thank you.
Wait a minute. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. How's everybody? Some of you complimented me on cracking a few jokes with the welcome to country libertarian method on Saturday. And unfortunately today, it being a very complex and difficult topic, I won't be making any attempt at humor. So I won't be funny for those of you who thought I was funny on Saturday. I'm going to start with an innocent question. Can any two people from the audience tell me what their birth date is without the year? Vanessa, I am 18th August. Connie? Yes, without saying the year. 29th of May. 25th September. Okay, we'll come back to that later. So I'll start with philosophy first. I have a slide somewhere. If you can, am I in the way of the slide? No? Okay. So we start with philosophy. And in order to start with philosophy, we start with metaphysics, which is the nature of the world around us. And nature is incredibly hostile to human beings. We think, oh yeah, when we go to this national park, it's so much fun. But if we were actually living in the wild, we might find it difficult to survive because we've never done that. I don't have any practice in killing rabbits or wild animals or surviving in the wild. And at a later age, it may be impossible. Ethologically, for humankind, their effective weapon is the brain. When you're starving to death, first you get rid of all the fat, then your muscle begins to waste. At no point does the brain begin to fade. It's brain power that enables humankind to conquer nature and to transform the environment to suit itself. This is the only animal on earth who transforms the environment. Everyone else tries to adapt. We try to adapt the environment to us. And we can do that because we have evolved a phenomenal brain size to do it. What it has also given us is self-conscious awareness. We're the only animal on earth who is aware of our own actions, of the effects of our actions on others. Therefore, we're the only animal on earth who can have morals. The tiger is not immoral because it kills sheep. It has no choice. That's his method of survival. We are choice-making animals. Therefore, rights and morality only apply to us. And under the natural rights philosophy that libertarianism also uses, so does Ayn Rand in objectivism, although she never calls it natural rights, rights belong to choice-making individuals because we got to have the right to make a choice. Making the correct choices is critical for survival. And that poses an enormous difficulty that even the father of anarcho-capitalism, one of the foremost libertarians, Murray Rothbard, couldn't get out of. Because he actually wrote in the Ethics of Liberty, in which he draws on natural rights that I just spoke about. At the bottom of page 100, he says, parents should be legally free to starve their children to death. So not if you have an obese child to give them less food so it'll be better for them in the long run, to starve them to death. because it's purely based on a non-aggression principle. So deducing all of philosophy from non-aggression creates a huge problem. So I'm not going to use libertarian arguments to make my point here. I'm going to use a completely different technique. But since Rob did refer to evictionism, I'll tell you what it is. Murray Rothbard and now Walter Block, my friend and a protege of Rothbard's, uses the evictionism argument. So it's like this fetus is a trespasser on your or the woman's body. You have the right to remove the trespasser, but not kill it. Now, the effect is if you remove the trespasser at 10 weeks old or 15 weeks old is as good as demise because it cannot survive. Maybe at 24 weeks it can survive. It will depend on the medical care, the kind of fetus, and a whole host of other factors. So that's how the libertarian argument is framed. I personally don't like it because a fetus is not a thinking individual. Therefore, it cannot be an invader. It's like even if a dog comes into your property because you got a hole in the fence, the dog is not an invader. He doesn't have a concept of invasion in his head. The fetus doesn't have rights because it's not a choice-making individual yet, which leads to the problem of what do we do with children? And libertarianism doesn't have a theory for children. So I've built a new kind of solution, which I haven't actually read anywhere, which is I would rather impose, which it is already legally, on parents a duty of care toward their children from a theoretical standpoint, to take care of them, to take reasonable care of them until they are grown up. And if they really can't, or if they really don't want to, they have to keep doing it. They can't starve them till they find some alternate and good parents. So now you're faced with the biggest decision of your life, to take care of a young person, a very young person, for 18 years. If lifetime employment contracts are fundamentally illegal. A company can't say you are tied to us for a whole life. It'll be thrown out by the courts. But this is almost effectively a lifetime contract. Therefore, I want to give the parents a deliberative choice and a decision window, whether it's 16 weeks, 24 weeks, 28, 19, it's debatable, but you should have a deliberative choice. If you're the poor 17-year-old in a fit of passion, you ended up becoming pregnant, you now have a deliberative choice to decide not to go ahead with what even religion called a vegetative soul, which then becomes an animal soul. St. Augustine believed that the soul comes into the body at quickening. And that is where I end. In order to get a deliberative choice, you have another decision window.
Thank you, Vinay and Rob. Okay, so now we will begin the rebuttal. Rob, you've got 4 minutes to respond. Time starts now.
Right, so I wasn't exactly sure which argument Vinay was going to make, which is why I had to try and cram a lot into my opening statement because I wasn't sure what I was exactly going to be arguing against. He's made an argument I didn't expect. He's basically made an argument that life begins at birth, and if you decide to terminate a pregnancy 30 seconds before birth, by his argument, that is a totally different thing to 30 seconds after birth. And I think that is basically on the surface of it, completely unfounded. I think his arguments about sort of moral action and choice and things like that, I think it's one of these pro-choice arguments that could just as easily be made to, a 2-week-old baby. And I think automatically we know that's unconscionable, right? So if a mother decides, well, look, I don't really want to, continue raising this child for another, 17 years and 10 months, and it's not really, a moral actor. It's not really making any choices. It's a bit like a dog. I don't think the mother or the father or the guardian, whoever is actually taking care of this child, should be allowed to actually kill it. And he has effectively made an argument that would justify that. And I will say I find it very easy to argue against these pro-choice arguments when they could be applied to what we all recognise as infanticide, because I think we should recognise, killing a baby 10 minutes before it's born or 10 minutes after it's born as the same thing, because it effectively is. It is still the same being. It's not a transformative moment when you're born. He's going to talk about, you remember your birthday, not your conception day or whatever else. It's probably because it's hard to figure out your conception day, but it's not really a transformative moment in what you're doing and what you are as a being. The real transformative moment is conception. And I thought he was going to make an evictionist argument. I've got a lot of comments about that probably aren't particularly relevant, but he did bring up the evictionist argument. So I will say I've been thinking about this a lot, and that there is a good example that proves this evictionist argument that says that, well, okay, life does begin at conception, but I can evict my baby, and if it dies, it dies. There is a good example in the real world of something like that we would not recognise as being a moral act. We would say it should be outlawed, as I'm arguing here that abortion should be. Let's say you own a big yacht, and you go and sell your yacht out into the middle of the ocean, and then you discover in the bottom floor of the yacht that you hadn't been into before you decided to sail off, that someone has actually kidnapped a guy and tied him up there, right? So this guy, he's not actually entered your yacht at all. He's not a trespasser, right? As a unborn child at conception would not be. They have not made a choice to trespass upon you. They're just there. You cannot decide that you want to evict him from your property until it's safe to do so. You can't just throw him out onto the water with the sharks. You have to wait till you get back to shore. And in any sort of libertarian legal order, if you just threw him to the sharks, you would absolutely be tried for murder. And I think that is what, even in cases of rape here, right, where you have not invited someone onto your property, but someone is on your property, but you have to wait until it's safe to evict them, as long as they are not actually threatening you, which is, again, the exception we carved out at the start. If they're not threatening your livelihood or destroying your property or anything like that, you cannot evict them morally or under a libertarian legal framework until it is safe to do so. So that is why I think this evictions argument doesn't work. But Vinay did not even make that argument. He just made a pro-choice life begins at birth argument, which has taken me by surprise, but I think it is it doesn't add up.
Okay, turn it around. Okay, I didn't make the eviction argument, nor did I say the installment, if you will, occurs exactly at birth, so 10 seconds before birth, everything is fine. But Rob did guess one thing quickly, which is, who knows their conception date? Nobody does, because it's not exactly 9 months. It could be 38 weeks. And even if you were told what it was, there's 5 days the sperm can stay in the tubes. So we really don't know. My actual argument is coming up next. Can we go to the last slide? Okay. There is a method that Karl Marx used called dialectics, which one of my scholar friends defines as the art of context keeping. Another way to define it is to look at one issue from a wide variety of angles, like a prism, right? So just as very quickly, we have looked at the philosophical base. If we actually don't have a good solution in the philosophical base, but religion itself, there are many Protestants and Catholics who are pro-choice. religion itself, I mentioned St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas thought there's the vegetative soul, then the animal soul, then comes the human soul. The ensoulment occurs in quickening week 16 or something. Science itself, there's been an enormous amount of debate in science about when does life begin, and the answer is gradualism. You know, we have to draw lines legally. Why is it 16 years and 9 months that you get a learner's license? Why not 16? Why not 17 and a half? Why drinking age in the US is 21? Somewhere you got to draw the line. And we know that some lines are terrible. You know, if you reduce the age of consent for sex to 9 years old, there's going to be a hue and cry. We move it by 6 months, people are not that bothered. Certainly you can't move it to 25, as the church used to say, no sex before marriage, and then might criminalize a whole lot of people. I'm going to touch slightly on consequentialism. In Brazil, which outlawed abortion, the number one cause of death among young women is botched up abortions, maternal deaths. Over thousands of people already are traveling from Texas to California to get their procedures done. They're just visiting friends. So you effectively, what you have is a law that is unenforceable. And John Ruddick always emphasized the wisdom of the majority. What has been the structure of common law in recent times? And in an anarcho-capitalist utopia, you won't have any legislation. You'd have to rely on jurists. And jurists would go, this is a practice. Just like what happens when you ban alcohol or you ban prostitution, the activities simply go underground. And that has outcomes that are far, far worse than if you draw the line somewhere. That's why in Roe versus Wade, they drew the line at the first trimester. In Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the line's been drawn further up. But at no stage has the line been drawn at 1 minute before birth. And there is the free market limitation is most doctors and most clinics absolutely refuse to take somebody who is 8.5 months pregnant. They have to make a decision within the first 3 months. That's where 98.5% abortions happen anyway. Thank you.
So what Vinay was talking about there for the most part was a continuity problem. Yeah, okay. So we got interrogation before closing statements. Okay. Sorry, I apologize. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So I did one question. So I don't mind the answer.
I'll let you ask the first question, Vinay.
All right, what about you both get up here?
Yeah.
Would you like to sit or stand?
Yeah, I'm all right either way. Okay, that's good. Oh, I need that.
Oh, you need that?
Yeah, sorry. I might need it, depending on the question. So I have raised the prospect of an unenforceable law based on what's happened in Brazil, based on what's happening in the United States, thousands of people traveling. So you have a culture that has now become pretty strongly pre-choice. And it was even so in the Middle Ages, especially during the first trimester. So you could also get a more advanced IU-486 pill, which has 2 compounds, and they have alternate uses, so they cannot be banned, like ivermectin wasn't banned. People might just take those medications at home, and no one will be the wiser. And You can't have the police taking a warrant on everybody who has a miscarriage. If they don't even tell anyone they were pregnant, you will never find out. How are you going to get around that?
Well, again, this is an argument that could theoretically be used for infanticide. So obviously it is sometimes hard to enforce some laws, but a libertarian government, as the proposition says, should outlaw abortion. A libertarian government should say that murder is illegal. Now, it's possible that there could be some pill that made it, look like, but no, not a miscarriage. There could be some pill that made it look like a 6-month-old baby died of SIDS. And that doesn't mean, well, it's going to be really hard to enforce murder laws against killing 6-month-old babies, so maybe we shouldn't bother. I don't think that's a sufficient argument for not prosecuting what we believe is murder. Now, I know you don't believe it's murder, but you're asking me what to do about this enforcement problem. I think it just is what it is. Sometimes it's going to be hard to enforce laws that should exist. Murder, theft, assault, fraud, these things should be illegal under a libertarian government. And that's effectively my position on that.
In the first 3 months, it would effectively be completely unenforceable. I mean, no one would even know if the woman hasn't told anyone. It's not showing. She hasn't told anyone she's pregnant. She either takes a pill, even if you banned all the clinics, she takes a pill. So it looks like a miscarriage, but maybe even a partner doesn't know that she was pregnant. And you drive the activity underground. People traveling from Texas to California, some people traveling from Brazil to somewhere else and dying is not the outcome we want. We want to have a humane, peaceful society where laws are actually enforceable.
Okay, so we'll move on to another question. So Rob, would you like to ask Vinay a question in regards to the rebuttal he made? Okay, sorry, Vinay gets 2 questions now.
Oh, I already asked one. He hasn't asked one.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So Vinay asked the question, I gave an answer, and he put his hand out, so I've allowed him to respond to my answer. There's only been one question. Yeah. So my question to you, Vinay, is, I guess, what is the limiting principle? So you've said that there is basically a continuity problem here. What would be your limiting principle to determine when it's okay and when it's not? Because it is very hard to determine, like when brainwaves start and things like that. How do you deal with the problem that you aren't just dealing with, I guess, when someone's allowed to, buy a vodka from a pub? It's when you're allowed to murder someone. How do you deal with the moral philosophy of maybe your solution is murder sometimes? How do you get around that?
There's quite a lot of not only legal precedent, but there's a lot of medical practice precedent in that the free market has said the clinic just closes at 21 weeks or 22 weeks or 24 weeks. And by all means, we can have more regulation, but by your own exception, if the mother's life is at risk, you're preferring the living to the non-living. So for that, the choice has to remain open until birth. So it is a difficult moral and ethical decision. It is a difficult medical decision. I don't believe that people take this very lightly, nor would doctors take it very lightly. In the majority of cases, it's over 99-point-something% for the first 2 trimesters, 98.5% over a large period of data in America in the first trimester. People are smart enough to make that decision early on. So in one sense, it resolves itself, but also you can have more regulation. I don't believe in casting it as homicide. You could have some regulation for which there is a penalty if you go beyond a certain time period. But it does absolutely end at birth. It completely ends, and it could end, a week or 2 before birth, with the exceptions. In that, I won't note rape as an exception because the woman had no choice. So why should we bear the baby of a stranger? But she shouldn't have to wait 8.5 months either. If she doesn't want to have the baby, She gets rid of it. Oh, the fetus. So it's a gray area, but regulation and the real market automatically determines what you can do.
Okay, Rob, I'll let you to respond to that, and then we will go to Q&A.
I need to respond.
You don't want to respond to that? Okay. All right. Yep. Okay, everybody give our debate. Oh, yeah, I was going to say give them a clap first for now. But they don't. All right, Rob, would you like to make your closing statement?
All right, so I think I have sufficiently made the argument that the most transformative moment is conception, because again, it looks very different before and after compared to birth. It looks extremely similar other than just where you are. And brain waves and heartbeats and other things that people can bring up are, again, very hard to detect. And if you try to, like, I know there's someone in our party who believes in the life begins at brain waves, and they've just, arbitrarily decided that, well, it usually happens at about this stage of pregnancy, so that's when you can terminate. But like this person will openly admit that means that some people that he considers alive will be murdered. And Vinay hasn't gone into the evictionist argument as much as I thought. He's taken me by surprise a bit. He's basically just made a pseudo life begins at birth argument, except maybe we can just have regulations here, regulations there. But I think his real, fault here is that this is a debate about what a libertarian government should do about it. And he's relying on so many things other than libertarian philosophy. And I don't think a libertarian government should. And a lot of the things he said, I don't agree with, and neither would, many other libertarians, and some would. But certainly, like, what should a libertarian government do about any issue should be predicated on libertarian principles. And if, he was criticizing the non-aggression principle, that is foundational to libertarianism. A libertarian government should outlaw things that violate the non-aggression principle. That's the only thing it should do. Now, I'm not sure libertarian government isn't an oxymoron, but to the extent that it isn't, in a libertarian society, violating the non-aggression principle should be outlawed. And if Vinay wants to make other arguments about other different sects of moral philosophy and consequentialism and enforcement, a libertarian government should not rely on that. A libertarian government should rely on self-ownership, private property, and the non-aggression principle. So that is what we should be looking at here. And when you are looking at that here, it's clear to me that life begins at conception, and terminating that life before birth or after birth is morally equivalent. So infanticide is, the absolute equivalent to what we call abortion here. And the argument I made about, the yacht, right? Just because, you've got someone on your property or in your property that you don't want there, you can't kill them to get them out. You have to wait until it's safe before you release them. Everyone recognized in my yacht example even covers the rape analogy, right? So like, it's not like the Tom Woods hot air balloon analogy, which is another one that's come up, where if you invite someone on your hot air balloon, you can't, when it's 60 feet in the air, say, I don't want you here anymore, I'm going to toss you out, because people will say in cases of rape, no one has been invited inside, and that is a reasonable argument. But in my yacht example that I gave, no one has been invited inside the yacht. They've been put there by someone else. So again, in cases of rape, that's exactly what the baby is. It's been put there by someone else. And if you want to, remove it from your body, it is a life. It has human rights. And you should only be allowed to do that when it is safe to do so. You don't get to kill an innocent human being because of the crime of another. The baby is not a criminal, and it should not be treated as such. It should not be murdered. And a libertarian government should respect that.
Hi, I never made the argument that the non-aggression principle should be cast aside. What I said was, I wrote an essay on this called Addressing the Gaps in Libertarian Theory. Libertarians try to deduce anything and everything from the non-aggression principle alone. And the world is a bit too complex. So you can't derive a foreign policy from non-aggression. There's a lot of things that you can't simply derive. We are in a continuum, in a complex situation. Justice Blackmun said in Planned Parenthood versus Casey that there's the right and liberty of the woman, not privacy, that we got to balance against the unborn. And they drew a line somewhere. That's what law does. Roe versus Wade was established in 1973. And there have been economic studies done that about 20 years later, there was a dramatic drop in crime rates across a variety of states because there were less unwanted babies. And that has been challenged over and over again, but the economists who put forward the paper have been able to withstand all those challenges. So the argument is as follows. First is the philosophical argument that we need a decision window. For the biggest decision of your life, we need a deliberative window. Since it is unclear when life begins, and rights do not automatically attach to life, rights attach to choice-making individuals which don't arise until many years into childhood, we need a theory to protect childhood. And because we need a theory to protect childhood, because it's such a huge responsibility, you now have to give a deliberative choice to the individuals involved, which is also, by the way, unsexist. So you're not making a murderer out of a woman, but both parents are now involved and responsible for the child they have produced. They cannot run away unless, of course, the woman whose sole choice it is decides not to have it. The reason the window extends today to the full 9 months, very rarely it happens, is in rare cases, I forget the term, it's anencephalic or something, is the baby is kind of dead on arrival and it's detected. So there's no point in continuing. Or there is a severe, some sort of brain damage, because it is in the last few weeks, the brain grows from week 35 to 38, the brain almost triples in size. Also, sometimes there is a risk to the mother that is found out very, very late. So people are not being actually responsible. They may be one or two, but the law's got to look at that. Some 17-year-old might drive into a crowd, but we maintain the driver's license, L plate 16 years, 9 months, because you got to just cut it somewhere. Voting age 18, you got to cut it somewhere. So we look at common law, we look at the consequences that we have already seen of banning alcohol, banning cigarettes, banning abortion. The consequences are extraordinarily bad. And therefore you come back, keep coming back, all the judges keep coming back to the decision window. More and more countries, that's why I've had a pro-choice. Even in Protestants, Black Protestants are highly favorable to pro-choice. More than 50% here in Australia and in the United States as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've now moved on to the Q&A section of the evening. But I'd like to thank Rob and Vinay again for putting forward some very valid points on both sides, I would say. Not going to give away who I agree with. Okay, so Lee, please give me a final round of applause now. We set up this Q&A. So remember that you can put your questions into Slido and you can vote the questions up. There's 15 questions at present. I think Victor's going to put it up. Okay. So if there's any questions you like, give it a thumbs up and it will go up in the queue. All right, so question 1. Also, what are the rights of the male parent in determining the survival of his child, which at the present time are ignored?
So from my perspective, abortion should be outlawed. So this would not be a factor. I guess it's more a question for Vinay here. If he thinks that certain people can, terminate a pregnancy and not others. It's more of a Vinay question. So.
It's a bodily autonomy question, so the woman gets the sole choice, but most women probably, I think, may, unless the boyfriend has run away or something, or parent has run away, would not normally may consult. But it's their choice whether to consult or not consult, or even to inform. Some regulations in the states do require them to inform, but I think it's purely a woman's choice, because she's bearing the cost of this pregnancy immensely all throughout the pregnancy, and then for years and years and years into life, even though she might get child support from someone who's abandoned her, it's her responsibility, therefore her choice.
Okay, let's hold on to it. All right, the next question is, what's the pro-life's view on conception from rape?
Yeah, well, that's more of a me question. So obviously, rape is a horrible act, but this is why I use the yacht example and not the hot air balloon example. So I don't think because you have had, a heinous crime committed against you, that you get to kill, an innocent third party. And again, if you own a yacht and you go out to sea and you discover that someone's on that yacht and you really don't want him on there because he's annoying and he smells bad and he asks stupid questions, right? You don't get to throw him overboard just because you don't want him there, and you have had a crime committed against you because he has not committed the crime if he's been kidnapped and put there. So as horrible as the situation this is, and this is the trickiest one from a pro-life perspective, I don't think the fact that you have had a crime committed against you means that you get to kill your unborn child, even if you did not consent to the act that put the child there. And if this was the only thing that there was a carve out for, that maybe you can, it's such a tiny percentage of terminations that I don't think it's really something that needs to be figured out from where we are now. But, up to me, I don't think a mother should be allowed to kill her unborn child, regardless of the circumstances, unless her life is under threat, which has been excluded from this debate.
Yeah, for me, it is doubly unjust. First, she was never a willing partner, and to condemn her to have the baby and look after, or even if you give it up for adoption, you always know, women always know there's a baby out there that's mine, half of mine, and it's going to affect their life forever. And it's beyond unjust to condemn them like that if they were never willing in the first place, even to that act.
Okay, next question. What is the difference between a woman terminating her pregnancy and a woman taking heroin while pregnant?
Can I go first? Okay. I don't quite know what the medical answer is if heroin is used as effectively the French pill. When the French pill became available, the compound used to have written on top of it has the risk of miscarriage if you take it. And you know what? Brazilian women started taking it to induce a miscarriage. So if heroin induces a miscarriage, it's a horrible thing. If the woman wants to continue the pregnancy, it is even more horrible because it's going to harm the child. If you're going to do it in a safe way, like in Justice Blackburn said in Roe versus Wade, the compelling interest of the state is the health of the mother. So if you're going to do it correctly, properly, under medical supervision. Please don't do coat hangers and all that kind of thing. And heroin to induce something sounds to me like a coat hanger method.
Yeah, so like Vinay, I'm not entirely aware of the medical consequences of this particular act. If it is effectively like, the morning after pill or whatever, then there's no difference. Both should be outlawed. But if it's not, then it shouldn't be. I'm not aware of the medicine behind this.
I think there's a misconception about the morning after pill. The semen can last for up to 5 days. So the morning after pill prevents future conception from happening. As I understand it, conception can happen anytime between the first 1 or 2 hours to 5 days. So if it has already happened, the morning after pill is ineffective. Then you've got to use the French pill or go into a surgery. So.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Yeah,
okay.
I think I got it. Should a man within, say, first 2 months of being informed he's to be fathering a child be able to opt out of involvement, including financial, from the child's life?
Okay, they're two separate questions. No to the financial and the involvement in the child's life. Obviously, there are absent fathers. You can't compel someone to take an interest in their child and be around. But the financial part is compelled. And sorry, he has participated in an unprotected sex act. There are consequences. And one of the consequences is if the woman decides to keep the child, you are up for financial aid to the extent you can afford it. There's no choice there.
I agree entirely with Vinay on that one. I believe in personal responsibility. I think it would be, hypocritical of me and all the screeching leftists on Twitter that called me a misogynist. They'd be right if I gave a different answer. Obviously, you can't compel someone to be involved in someone's life, but if you have taken that decision upon yourself, you should at least be financially liable, yeah.
Okay. All right, next question's for Vinay. Where does moral come from if Vinay thinks we should have abortion up to birth? Why not legalize child porn? It's worse than abortion or killing.
Okay. I guess mischaracterized. I'm in favor of broadly the common law as it stands, and broadly the actual medical practice as it stands, where almost 99% of terminations do happen in the first 3 months. It's incredibly rare in the last trimester. There are regulations around it in terms of a late discovery of a severe problem with the child or with the woman. The reason I don't accept the libertarian viability argument is that something can be almost not human and viable. You can end up with an IQ between 20 and 30 with excessive Down syndrome or something else, not always. And it's barely viable, but it's not human as we know it. So if late complications develop, you want to leave the decision window open. What I'm saying is, it's not the government's business, but it is the business of the woman and her medical staff to decide what to do if complications develop later on. And that's why we have this 2 doctors or 3 doctors sign off, whatever, for later processes. No, I wouldn't legalize child porn. There's no connection between child porn and what we're talking about. The up to birth is by exception, rather, with education, we're trying to get it done in the first 3 months as much as possible.
Look, I've met Amanda Conn. There's no way I'm letting doctors decide this. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. All right. There's a few questions that haven't been voted up, but they're interesting. So I'm actually going to put this one up on the screen. Why is it okay to terminate a fetus, but not an NDIS participant? Neither can survive without the other. Both are parasites to others.
Yeah, so this is something that I think Vinay was getting into dangerous territory with, talking about, only someone who can make choices actually has human rights. A coma patient isn't making any choices. Like, a 2-week-old baby isn't really making many choices either. When I'm not making many choices when I'm asleep. I think this idea that that's where your rights come from, your ability to make choices, I could see that as, I guess, a species rights comes from that potentially. But this idea of, well, this member of this species isn't making any choices, but this one is, so this one has rights and this one doesn't. I think that really opens up a Pandora's box into how many people you can kill if you feel like it, and I'm very uncomfortable with it.
Okay. The choice-making theory is the foundation of libertarianism. You can read that up in John Locke, Natural Rights. You can read that up in even the religious scholar like St. Thomas Aquinas. Read it in the Declaration of Independence, in the US Declaration of Independence. Read it in Rothbard's Ethics of Liberty. That part I didn't make up. The rights, natural rights arise in choice-making individuals. The great deficit that I talk about in libertarian and natural rights theory is, so then what about children? How do we protect children? And you need a new theory for that, for which sort of I made up a theory which is already illegal, which is the contract. You have a contract because you've had a deliberative chance, a second window, a decision time to have a contract, and then you can't run away anymore because you've made that very, very difficult contract, but you've made it now. So I don't have a good answer on NDIS. Again, there are fortunately lots of charities, private charities, that if NDIS was absent, they would help people like that survive. But that's all we can actually do, depending on how difficult their disability is.
Okay. This one has come up again. I asked the earlier question about financial responsibility for men. Let me rephrase. With abortion legal, why don't men have the same opt-out as women?
Because the male has made the huge responsibility of pregnancy itself and of childcare in the early years. It doesn't matter what the left says, it does in virtually every household fall on women when they are breastfeeding, when they're taking time off their careers. And as much as some men might like to say, I want to share labor pain with you, well, they can't, even if they wanted to. They can't share the morning sickness. They can't share the belly getting bigger. They can't share the incredible health risks that you have, and they do not share the same amount of bonding and attachment. So we are a different species, different gender. We are different. We don't have to, fortunately, make such very difficult decisions, such as termination. But on the other hand, now you can't escape the financial consequences.
Yeah, again, my answer to this potential asymmetry is to outlaw abortion. I don't think it should be legal to murder your unborn child. I've made that quite clear. That this is potentially just delving into like a vaguely related topic. Topic here is, should a libertarian government outlaw abortion? I certainly think a libertarian government should outlaw abortion, and I do think that given that men are personally responsible for a conception, a new life, and they should be, financially responsible when they do that. I believe in personal responsibility. Now, while abortion is legal, there's an asymmetry there, but the answer there isn't to, let deadbeat dads off the hook. It's to recognize that life begins at conception and outlaw abortion.
The asymmetry is provided by nature. We can't do anything about it. The left will tell you men can fall pregnant, and we know that's bullshit. It's some woman who's changed her sex with some trans surgery. Otherwise, we can't. End of story.
Okay. All right. Just this one will pop up. What is your stance on born alive after a failed abortion bill? So that is the bill where they leave babies that have been or attempted to be aborted are left to die. And legally now, doctors do not have to provide care. Would anyone like to speak on that one?
Yeah, so this is thankfully rare, but what isn't rare is late-term abortions that do exist, that they're sort of partially born, that labour is induced, and then they're killed. So even like, Walter Block's evictionism argument, he says that he's kind of a pro-life guy because he'd outlaw that. But certainly I would support this. So if I'm going to say that all abortion is outlawed, then this isn't even abortion. This is just infanticide. So our party does not have a policy or a position on abortion, but I would argue our party does have a position that murder should be illegal. And if a baby is born alive as part of an abortion procedure, putting it in the corner and letting it die is murder, even if you're pro-choice. That would be my perspective on that one.
I don't even know if that occurs. From what I've heard, that's happened in the French bill, RU 486 cases, where if it is done very late, rather than in the first 10 weeks, which is what is allowed in New South Wales, then you can get a fetal heartbeat that stops very soon thereafter. But it causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of guilt and shame, and it's incompetence on the part of the doctors, but it's incredibly rare, and those babies don't actually survive anyway. But it is a difficult situation, I agree with that. It's been demonized as though there is a completely viable child that could become a fully functioning adult and last for 75, 80 years on this earth. That I don't buy that at all. That's not what the cases have been. There's been a heartbeat for a few minutes at best.
Okay. All right. I'm going to actually pop this question up. Might even comment on it myself. What's the difference between aborting a non-sentient fetus, well, they're not non-sentient, and killing a sentient animal for consumption? Why is one okay but not the other?
Yeah, so human rights belong to humans, and it does not matter at what stage they are in their human development. They have human rights. Animals do not have human rights. I do actually, controversially believe that octopuses have property rights, and you should not be allowed to steal from them. But that is, again, I guess, outside the scope of this. But it is, yeah, the difference here is that humans have human rights and animals don't.
Yeah, animals is another very complex area. We cannot possibly give animals the same rights as we have and still manage to live on this earth like the way we do. It's not just about meat eating, it's about every bridge, every skyscraper, every major development of affecting some of the other species. And that's why some extraordinarily big projects have got stopped, because this little lizard would go extinct. So we are in a difficult situation, but where actually society has ended up is I'm very comfortable with that. So to avoid needless killing of animals and to avoid needless torture and pain, so that, as much as possible, it's humane. Unfortunately, that's the best we can do at the moment. We are in competition. Sometimes we're in competition with certain kinds of animals.
I'm just going to comment on that one. So as a vegetarian who actually doesn't eat animals, we can actually throw that question back at this person. They're claiming that a fetus is non-sentient. Well, that is absolutely incorrect. A child within your womb is definitely sentient. So at least I'm consistent on where I value life, just to throw myself in there. And I actually did put this question to Emma Hurst in front of John Ruddick, where obviously she's the Animal Justice MLC, and she actually was stunned. She's there voting for pro-abortion, but she's there fighting for animal rights. I find that very contradictory, to be honest, as someone who values all life.
I hope she's a vegetarian at least.
She's a vegan. But she, is pro-abortion. So interesting, isn't it? Okay. Let's see. We'll do a few more questions. What is the time? Does it 8:15? Okay.
You know it's after 8:10 because there's lots of noise out there. State of origin has started. Yeah.
All right. Here's a good one. Oh, if it works. Oh. Okay. Should men be allowed to have an opinion on and debate abortion?
Three answers to this. Well, firstly, this debate is primarily about libertarian philosophy and how it intersects with abortion. So yes, like men who have an interest in libertarian philosophy should be able to. And secondly, I was an unwanted child. So to say that I don't have a stake in this is ridiculous. My mother did not particularly want to give birth to me, but she did not believe in abortion, and that's why I'm here. So to say it only affects women is ridiculous. We were all unborn children at one point. So it affects us all. And my third point is, like, even disregarding that, this idea of, oh, you're not allowed to have a say on what the law should be about this unless it directly affects you, is a leftist, social democrat, ridiculous sort of trait. I throw back at them, like assuming this is, a lefty troll from our Twitter sphere. It might not be. It might be a party member. But if it is, should someone be allowed to have a say on what mining royalties are if they don't have a coal mine, right? Should you be allowed to have a say on what the top rate of tax is if you don't pay the top rate of tax? Of course you should. Everyone should be allowed to have a say on what the law is because it all affects us all in some way. And these sort of ridiculous questions about who gets to have an opinion on what is, I think it's the number one reason that our political culture in Australia and the West broadly is in such a bad shape.
Well, once you make it a legal issue, it's clear that men are going to they need to have opinions. I mean, your obs gynaec or consulting doctor may be male. You have a choice. Women have a choice to go to female doctor. You don't always have a choice as to who the judge is. Planned Parenthood versus Casey, Justice Kennedy is the presiding judge. He's male. Just live with it, basically. It's philosophy, it's law. We can have an opinion, although in my case, I have left the actual decision of termination entirely in the woman's hands. But one point I'd make, which I didn't make, is that under no circumstances should any other medical professional, nurse or doctor, male or female, be compelled to undertake a procedure that they think in their conscience is very sinful. So that would be completely wrong. And it's your responsibility to find the people who can do things for you as a woman. That's all, male or female.
Okay, I'm just going to put this one up there because I think Rob will get a kick out of it. Pro-life is a socialist position. If you prefer to see a lazy, homeless drunk starve with no welfare, you should not tax a woman's body to support a parasite.
Yeah. That is, again, it does not seem like it was written by a libertarian. It seems like it's written by a troll from our Twitter sphere, and I can tell because it's so ridiculously low IQ. So pro-life is a socialist. Like, we're not taxing a woman's body, right? A tax is theft, right? We're saying you're not allowed to murder. The difference between me stealing something from you and saying, hey, you better not kill your kid, very different things, not tax.
We'll do a couple. Oh, did you want to speak on that one?
Yeah, pro-life is a position based entirely on one statement only, which is that life begins at conception. That has been challenged by theologians, including Christian theologians, even occasionally in Islam, and certainly at law and in practice, and by the attitudes of many people. So it's just not a socialist position. It's based on something that it's not undilutedly accepted by science. It's a gradualism position in science rather than at that instant life begins.
Okay, so I'm just going through the list of questions that remain, and a lot of them I feel like you both have already answered, and a lot of them are leftist trolls.
I love leftist trolls.
Which is fine. We love you guys. I'm just going to read this one out because this is, to me, this is also the cultural sort of the culture we're in right now. Life is suffering. It is better to not be alive than, what? It is better to not alive than alive. Okay, this person can't even write properly. Abortion is hence a good thing because it is moral to prevent suffering and abort every fetus. This is what I'm talking about. Like, that's just lovely. Honestly, I do think you've answered most of these questions. Oh, what if a family member raped their children? I feel like we already have answered that from a
Again, like I've tackled the question of rape. It doesn't make it different if it's a family member. It makes it more tragic. But again, because something tragic has happened to you, it does not mean that you get to kill your child. And if you accept everything I've said up to that point, it's still true at that point. It's, very tragic. Like, libertarians believe in restitution. So certainly, if you'd been raped by a family member and then you had to give birth, like the restitution involved in that particular crime would be off the scales. But again, like the unborn child there is totally innocent. So something horrible happening to a person does not mean they get to go and kill babies. And as long as you agree with me that life begins at conception and that murder is a violation of the non-aggression principle, then a libertarian government should outlaw terminating a child fathered by a family member who raped you. But again, these are this is not something that happens very regularly. If we got to a point where everyone agreed with me right up to that point, I'd be very happy at the amount of babies I'd save with my arguments.
Okay. As far as I know, even the religious opinion expressed in both St. Thomas Aquinas and Augustine is the ensoulment occurs at quickening around 16 weeks. So I would be very hard-pressed. I would definitely stomp on this thing. Absolutely, the woman should have the choice. She never had a choice of, voluntary sex in the first place. So no question there. And whoever this family member you're saying raped their children, so it's the own whoever, father or stepfather, has done enormous damage, should be in jail for life.
Okay. We're going to wrap it up. I'm just trying to find a question that you guys have already not answered. Okay, I'll put this one up. Okay, well, I think we will put this up because we'll talk about responsibility. Two consenting adults could agree to have sex for fun and not have children. A fetus is not a party to that contract. Accidents do not give fetus right to life.
Well, the fetus is alive whether or not you think that there was a contract or not. So the fetus is alive. What certainly does not give anyone a right to do there is commit murder. So again, if you believe life begins at conception, it doesn't matter if it was deliberate or not. You can make this argument that this person who was not, given a contract to live, this argument could apply to killing them when they're 60 years old, which is absurd. So I think on the face of it, this argument is out of order.
As I understand it, there is a progression. The egg is alive, actually, the sperm's alive in a sense. Then there is conception in a fetus. The blastomere can still produce twins and two completely different individuals. So we are talking about a progression scientifically that would end at a certain stage in the birth of a completely individuated organism that can survive by itself outside of the body. So put that to one side. So yes, the fetus is not a party to that consenting contract, but like the court said, we have conflicting interest. At some point, the state has to take an interest in the unborn and definitely in the child when it's born.
Okay, I think we're going to conclude the Q&A section with that.
I would like to answer that.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. We'll do one more question then. Why is there so little discussion regarding harms to women from abortion? There is always the assumption abortion is a positive for women.
Yeah. So again, if search through YouTube and you go on like pro-life YouTube, which, you know, based on my arguments today, unsurprised to see that I'd gone through there. There are a lot of women who really end up regretting their abortion once they think about it more. So a lot of abortions are very, you know, young women that aren't really thinking about, you know, sort of philosophy and morality, that they grow up in this culture when they're told it's your body, your choice. And, you know, if you don't want this baby, you've got other options. And they go and do that. And then they end up traumatized by it for the rest of their lives. And I do think it's a big problem that I wouldn't put this on Vinay. Like Vinay has said that it's a very serious decision to make or whatever. But I think some of the hardcore pro-choice, you know, lefties and those sort of people out there, they do absolutely just think that it is healthcare. And when we keep saying that abortion is healthcare and that's all it is, and everyone has the right to termination care whenever they feel like it, it does create this culture where young women who you know, aren't really thinking about, you know, the morality of what they're doing, and also not just young women, young men who are sometimes involved in these decisions, right? So sometimes it's a young married couple, or sometimes it's you know, a de facto couple or something like that, and they'll talk about it, and the men will be like, oh yeah, I'm not ready for this responsibility. Men pressure women into abortion. This isn't just about, you know, taking away women's rights, as I'm told I'm constantly doing. Like, men sometimes pressure women into abortion and then they regret it, you know, late into life, and sometimes the men regret it as well, and sometimes the men are just, you know, deadbeats who never think about it again. But this is a real serious problem, not necessarily with the legal side that we're talking about. What should a libertarian government theoretically do? Just the culture of it. I do think if we're going to, you know, maintain the legal status quo, we certainly need to change the culture around what it actually is, and not just keep telling women that it's healthcare.
As far as I know, again, I believe there is a need for and a requirement for counseling, which should say these things that you might regret, you might end up being very depressed about it, and so on. And I mean, in summary, I of all the people to bring on the words of Jesus, it shouldn't be me, but let me quote anyway. If I get it wrong, Victor will correct me. They know not what they do. Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. And it's that compassion that we've got to fill ourselves with in respect of these. Some of these women are much older, but some are 17, 18, 20. They've committed something, they've done it wrong. They are sort of 1 or 2 weeks or 3 weeks pregnant. And you know in your heart that if they proceed to terminate, it is quite likely that they will possibly get depression and regret, which is a way of saying that God has already punished them and is punishing them. We don't need the state to add to that punishment. They're suffering already.
Okay. So one thing I will wrap up this talk with is we do have a very big culture problem. Did you put your question in, Slido? Okay, all right, one quick comment. I will allow it.
Yeah, just to support Vinay's argument about Jesus Christ, one scripture that came to me was that the fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. Their deeds are vile. There is no one who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on all mankind to see if there are any who understand, any who seek God. All have turned away, all have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Do all these evildoers know nothing? They devour my people as though eating bread, and they never call on the Lord, but there they are, overwhelmed with dread. For God is present in the company of the righteous. You evildoers frustrate the plans of the poor, but the Lord is their refuge. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores his people, let Jacob rejoice and Israel be glad.
Well, that kind of leads into what I was going to say about culture. So I think the problem we have is a very big culture issue right now, where, you know, the left are wrapping this up as healthcare and, oh, your body, your choice. But, you know, I've personally spoken to quite a few women that have had abortions, and it's never just their choice. their partner's heavily involved, their family could be pressuring them, their friends are telling them they've got a career, that, you know, there's all these other pressures that come into play when it's making this choice for their body, which again, as you know, we know it's not your body as well. And I think that line is ridiculous. My body, my choice. There are two bodies involved. And what I found hilarious during COVID was when we were using that term, my body, my choice, for a vaccination, the pro-abortion were like, oh, how dare you use that, you know, for some, like really, like this is the contradictions of the left, even the right in many ways. But I think it is a culture problem where you have people like Greens MLCs getting up and talking about, oh, it's healthcare, and manipulating language to young women. At the end of the day, and we know this, if you do believe that abortion is murder in a libertarian society, and if it was a pro-life society, yeah, it would be outlawed. But, you know, that gentleman that made this point, oh, you know, we didn't make a contract, whatever, like there's contraception, there are other things to do, and yes, accidents happen. But the biggest problem we have in culture today is that nobody has any self-responsibility. Everyone looks to the government to save them. Everybody looks to the state to fix their problems. They have no self-responsibility. And, you know, in my opinion, if you are out there having sex, whether it's protected or not, you know that will lead possibly to life being created. So just take some damn responsibility for yourselves and for what you create. This is the culture we have today, and it's just sad.
Oh, I did want to say that, I did want to say that Gemma is a regular guest on a segment on Sky called 2 versus 1. I think she's taken a role on that quite literally here and made this 2 versus 1. But thank you for your contribution. Please give Gemma a round of applause.
Oh, is that it? Okay, good.
I just wanted to take the piss out of you for being a very biased moderator in my paper.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, guys. Would you please give Vinay and Rob a round of applause? And perhaps they've both given you all something to think about, no matter what side of the fence you sit on. Have a great night, and we'll see you all next month.